Hi everyone, and welcome to Bowling Green, New York City's first park and also the home of the U.S. Customs House named for Alexander Hamilton, whose birthday it is today. Thanks, Eagle Lead. We're broadcasting in 360, which means you can use your mobile device to look around the gorgeous rotunda here at the Alexander Hamilton U.S. Customs House. You can look up and see the skylight and the murals painted in the 1930s by artist Reginald March that depict scenes of New York Harbor, which is right to our west over there. Hi, Deborah. And you can also appreciate this rotunda of this beautiful Beaux-Arts building designed at the turn of the century by architect Cass Gilbert of McKim, Mead & White. The building used to be where duties were levied for imports and is now the home to the Museum of the American Indian. So it's open to the public and everyone is welcome to come and visit. There's also a U.S. Southern District Court here, and it's a place where the GSA has offices, and you can get your passport here too. So there's something about the comings and goings from New York that is still official business here, and also it's the home of the city's first park. So now I want to take you outside after you've looked up using your mobile device, either scrolling on the phone or actually tilting it, and looked all around at the rotunda. This building is run by the federal government, but it is at the doorstep of the city, a city park, and in fact, the city's first park. So that's where we're going today. And as we walk there, I hope that you'll use the 360 to continue to look around and see all the gorgeous details of this building. It's actually the second custom house that was built on this site after a fire destroyed an earlier one. Can everyone look down and see the marble and the inlaid designs? You're going to 3D this. And now we are going to, there's elevators over here, but we are going, and check out this staircase. Tell me how it looks in 360. All right, when we get outside, we are going to meet New York City Parks Director of Art and Antiquities, Jonathan Kuhn, who knows perhaps more about the history of New York City than anyone else, and certainly the city's parks. Like I said, we're going out into Bowling Green at the tip of Lower Manhattan, just near the Battery. And, oh, thank you. And we're going to learn more about the city's first park. I see Jonathan waiting for us. Jacana, you definitely have to visit New York City, and this is the place where New York City sort of all began. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Jan.
Thanks for meeting me here in Bowling Green on Hamilton's birthday.
It's pretty remarkable.
Could you tell us a little bit about what this space might have looked like when Hamilton was born?
Sure. We're at the heart of Manhattan, essentially, sort of where New York started, where it began. Off to over here, we've got the Battery and the shoreline of Manhattan, and you have to imagine it was just a small sort of Dutch trading outpost at one time. Then this area just to our north here would have been a cattle market at one point. Even before the Dutch arrived, I believe it was a place where sort of tribal councils of Native Americans in the regions could gather. Once the Dutch settled here and famously trade trinkets of a large amount of real estate,
Oh, people can't hear you, so talk louder.
Okay. The area was a cattle market, a Native American council ground, a parade ground for the military. But you have to imagine 3-story buildings, frame houses, Dutch-style pitched roofs, looking a little bit like Amsterdam. This was New Amsterdam until 1664 when the British came in and turned it into New York. And what we're looking at is an enormously historic site in the history of the park system in New York. It's really the origins of the park system. public lands came under the British Governor Dongan in 1686, and in 1733, March of 1733, this area was designated Bowling Green. It was enclosed by a fence. We'll approach it in a little while to look at that much more closely, but it was leased for a single peppercorn to 3 well-meaning citizens. They in turn had to improve it for, quote-unquote, the beauty and ornament of the said street and the delight and recreation of the inhabitants of the city.
And so there, the Department of Parks and Recreation eventually sprung. Okay, we're gonna.
As we're standing here, I can't help but point out behind us, the building from which you've just exited, this magnificent customs house, and the relations. Of course, Hamilton himself was instrumental in the setting up of our financial systems, and of course, that's where we stand now, in the financial district of Manhattan, in the business, not far from Wall Street, not far from where Hamilton is buried in Trinity Church. And just to point out for one moment, this facade of the building, you have 4 sculptures by Daniel Chester French, and they represent the 4 continents: Asia, America, Europe, and Africa by Battery Park.
People are asking us to refer to left and right. I'm not sure which is my left and which is your left. So we'll kind of reference in front of us and behind us. Behind us is to the south, and that's where the Alexander Custom House building is that we were just inside of. And to my left and to the west in general is the Battery and the port that made New York so important in the first place.
Right, there's a building, number 1 Broadway. I hope it's in your view off to our left and the west. You can see the insignia mosaics of many port cities. This was a shipping terminal at one point where you'd get steamship tickets, and now it's a Citibank.
I have not seen Hamilton the musical, but Jonathan has. I believe he saw it right in the early days.
In the very early days. It's a remarkable thing, and it really sort of takes this rich history of our origins of a nation and connects it to who we are as a people now and our diversity. And so forth. It's just magnificent.
And of course, there are so many places in New York City and in New York City Parks where Hamilton lived or spoke or did business or died.
True enough. Not far from where I live in the West Village of Manhattan, on James Street, I think it's 80 to 82 James Street, there's a little plaque on a building, and it says, "This is where Hamilton died." Most people think he died in New Jersey because he was killed he was hit in a duel with Aaron Burr, by prior vice president. This was in Weehawken, New Jersey, on the bluffs across from New York City. They rode him back across, and he went to a friend of his, Mr. Baird, on James Street, and he actually expired there. Further uptown, we have, if you go northward in Manhattan, we have a fountain on the west side of Manhattan, Riverside Drive, 76th Street. It's called the Robert Ray Hamilton Fountain. That was put up in honors his great-grandson, I believe. It's this ornamental, glorified horse trough, frankly. If you go east into Central Park, behind the Metropolitan Museum, around 82nd Street, you'll find a sculpture of Alexander Hamilton given by his son in 1880 to the city of New York. I want
to thank everyone, all the viewers, for helping the other viewers who are new to 360. Yes, you can move the camera. You are in charge of the camera. You can move it with your finger, or you can take the phone and move it all around and see the beautiful views that we are seeing here in Bowling Green, New York City's first park. I've put the camera here in this spot because if you look in front of me, which is maybe behind you, you will be able to read a plaque which speaks to the history of this park and the actual fence that it is hung on.
Yeah, this is, I think, the only fence I know of in New York City that has its own individual landmark status. You have to, again, think about what this place was like more than 200 years ago. After it was enclosed, when under British rule, a sculpture was put up at its center, where today there's a fountain. And that was to King George. And
let's walk towards the fountain. I hope everyone had a chance to. Oh, you want to look at the photos first of what it looked like?
Okay, we can walk in.
Let's walk towards the fountain. So, in the 1700s, in 1770, a statue of King George was installed here, and it was not well loved by the inhabitants.
Right.
So a fence had to be put around it, around this bowling green, so that it would be protected. Of course, right after the Declaration of Independence was read to Washington's troops on steps of Independence Hall, just up the way, up at City Hall, the first thing that they did was come down here and topple the statue and make the symbolic statement.
Right, it's the only sculpture we've ever lost to iconoclasm in our collection.
Oh, is that true?
Thankfully.
How many sculptures are there in the New York City Parks collection?
We have 800 monuments, and within that, about 250 sculptures, and from those, a couple hundred represent different individuals of significant in our past. George III was replaced by George I, George Washington, who's at the Union Square, the South End, a very well-known sculpture. That's our earliest sculpture, put up in 1856.
Oh, so the sculpture in Union Square was first put up in this space and then moved there?
No, it was put up there. But the connections across time, the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence took place on January 9th, 1776, just up the street on Broadway. They marched down, as Adrian's described, and they toppled the sculpture. A little piece survives. It's the tail of the horse on which he sat, and it's in the collection of the New York Historical Society. Indeed, on the fence, there were once royal crowns symbolizing the British rule, and those also were knocked off the fence. And so even though this fence is landmark, you don't see those crowns anymore on the pickets. George Washington
the fence, though, is so interesting because there are parts of the fence that actually date back to 1771.
Yeah.
The Parks Department has blacksmiths that continue to maintain the fence, the wrought iron fence, here and at other locations around the city, but this one is certainly the oldest. And I know people are appreciating the 360 feature. Maybe we can have people tell me what you see and tell everyone else what you see and tell everyone else what to look for and maybe where it is. We are now standing on the south side of the fountain in Bowling Green Park in Lower Manhattan, which is New York City's first park, and there is a plaque in front of me and down and perhaps behind you, which testifies to that.
And that plaque was actually put up, it's got an old-timey typeface, as you can see, but it was put up in 1939. Why is that important? Well, 38 actually. It was a year before they opened the World's Fair in Flushing Meadow Park, and they had a program to identify sites of historic value around the city for all the tourists they expected to come to the World's Fairs. So Mayor LaGuardia stood here with Commissioner Moses, and they dedicated this plaque, which sort of formalized this role of this place as the oldest park in the New York City park system. Of course, it's January, so the fountain is off, and there's soil here. In the summertime, you'll see lovely flower beds, but I'd like to show you a photograph, if I could. Hold it up very close, and maybe some of you can see it. And this shows you what the park would have looked like in 1870, when the buildings were predominantly about 3 or 4 stories before all the 1920s and 30s skyscrapers, and the horse carriages would turn around, and there was a fountain in the middle of the park back then. That fountain disappeared and was replaced by a sculpture of a man named Abraham de Peyster, an early Dutch governor. So I'm just showing one other photo from 1942, which shows you how this would have looked like. See that, Adrian?
And there's the sculpture where a fountain is now.
Put up 1896. Sculpture got moved when they kind of worked on the subway in the 1970s to another location. It's today in Foley Square.
I wonder if we put it here, if people can sort of see it superimposed.
There you go. There you go.
All right.
And you can even see a tourist in the 1940 sort of looking at the sculpture. So this is a place where almost anybody who visits New York for a day or two will eventually arrive. They'll see the Statue of Liberty, the Battery. This is where New York began. And this little park is essentially exactly the same, this little half-acre park as it sort of was. It looked like 250 years ago, and yet the world around it has changed dramatically.
All right, Periscope, I'm picking you up and taking you northward as we explore the rest of this tiny park. And we're going to get to a surprise feature, maybe for some of you who don't know what's there. I'm not even going to tell you. You have to stay tuned with us, but you're going to like it because everybody does. It's so interesting to see the different layers of history that are apparent here. As you look around, the fence, as we said, is from 1751. The custom house where we started the broadcast was completed in 1807. And then you can see other buildings that were built at around that time. You can recognize the Beaux-Arts architecture. And then, of course, the more modern glass and steel.
You can even see ventilation shafts for the subway running underneath.
The subway, of course, is an old system, but
the IRT, they built it around 1904, so this park had to get kind of dug up a few times. The two fountains, sculptures came and went, and now we're approaching possibly the most famous sculpture in New York.
Does anyone know what it is? Oh, you're welcome, Tucky One. And Kegami, thanks for watching. It's no longer a guessing game. If you turn the camera to behind you or in front of me, it is an interesting story, King George. You will see, does anybody see and recognize the rear end of the charging bull?
Right, it's probably the only sculpture I know of in our collection that has a police security detail.
There's the NYC.
Ever since Occupy Wall Street. Famously, this was first placed by the artist who made it, Arturo Di Modica. In 1989, he dropped it one night as a publicity stunt in front of the New York Stock Exchange. It worked, the publicity stunt. The Parks Commissioner at the time took a shine to it, had an affection for animal art. We first placed it here on a temporary basis. It became so embraced by New York City and everybody who visits that we've kept it here ever since. Some people sort of think it refers literally to the bull stock market, but the artist himself, he saw it as a more representative of the hopes and aspirations of the American people and those who arrive here, newly arrived immigrants. So there's a connection in some sense between Charging Bull and who Alexander Hamilton was, where we started this walk through in the sense of the promise of America, symbolized both by the Customs House, named for Alexander Hamilton, this historic site, Bowling Green, which originates the park system, and the bull, which is sort of looking forward and represents the strength of our people. So,
how much does the bull weigh?
Several thousand pounds. And I want to make a shout out. Very few people know who made this bull. It was made by a little bronze foundry in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, Beatty Mackey Bronze Foundry. They're a small family-run business. They're 3 generations, and they made some of our greatest sculptures. They also made the East Coast Memorial and Battery Park nearby, and the Iwo Jima Monument. So they made several copies ultimately of this, but we have the original, we're proud to say.
And here it is, Bowling Green, New York's first park, Charging Bull. Jonathan, thanks so much for meeting us out here today and telling us about the rich history of this location.
You're very welcome.
Southern Manhattan.
It's always nice to stroll through Lower Manhattan, especially when the sun is shining in mid-January.
So everyone, take one last look around at Bowling Green with the Alexander U.S. Custom House to our south as we're broadcasting live in 360 from Bowling Green on Alexander Hamilton's birthday.
Take care.
I'm Adrienne Sass for NYC Parks, and we'll see you in the park.